We'll start off with the UFC from last night. You had Alexander Rakić getting himself a win over Anthony Lionheart Smith, shutout decision, lackluster fight. This was an opportunity for the light heavyweight division for contenders to really step up, put a name to yourself, and make the fans want to watch you again. And Anthony's kind of been. This is probably more so in the camp of Rakić, because I do feel like Anthony Smith's probably built up enough cachet with UFC fans for people to know that, he is the goods to be a true contender. He's been up there in championship fights and, has just put up some crazy performances in the past. He obviously was coming up a rough loss to Glover Teixeira, but people have seen him at the heights. Rakić is a guy who I think is coming off a loss. You want to kind of show that next generation is here. He's 28 years old, has had some pretty sensational knockouts, and it felt like really when was on the feet was dominating the fight. Other than like one big hammer from Anthony Smith. And so it was kind of strange not to see him go to that well a little bit more. He clearly hurt Anthony Smith early on with the leg kicks, dropped him in the first round, and didn't really make him stand. Was very comfortable with being on top, controlling the fight, and cruising himself to a win. So it is good. He is back in the win column. He got himself a win over a title contender. So I think that if his resume builds up, that's definitely one that he'll be able to lean on, but it's not a fight that he's able to lean on himself where everybody's going to be looking at him and saying, yeah, that's a guy who could be the heir apparent to John Jones. And look, we're going to get Jan Blachowicz and Dominic Reyes later on this month. And so, if he can get back in there and show something there, then, maybe he'll be back on the top of people's minds to be a contender again. But that definitely wasn't the performance. It was funny. It was funny because this night started off with such a bang, man. You were talking about some crazy performances left and right. You started the night with 4 straight submissions. And then the rest of the night was a little bit of a whimper. There was still some good fights in there, namely Ricardo Lamas getting his win over Bill Algeo. Might be the end for Ricardo Lamas. Might be a fight where he is going to hang him up afterwards. But, to go to the co-main event, you had Robbie Lawler with his performance against Neil Magny. And people were very excited. I think probably out of everything tonight, you were most excited to see Robbie back in action. He hadn't fought in a year's time with his loss to Colby Covington. And I said this earlier in the week on Twitter, like Robbie Lawler, for my money, is one of the most entertaining fighters of all time. I really think he was probably at one point had the crown as the most entertaining fighter of all time. But to me, that crown now resides in Lafayette, Louisiana, with the Diamond Dustin Poirier, who's now rumored to fight Tony Ferguson, which we can get into that a little bit later because that is just that's one that's violence to the nth degree. But I feel bad for both of these guys in this regard because the way it's hard not to interpret this fight and to sway towards the negative with Robbie as far as where his career is, more so than the positive with Neil. And that's just kind of, I think, the natural thing of it, because I'll give a couple of rubs to Neil right quick. You look at this afterwards and you look at Neil's resume, and he's now won 3 in a row. He's beaten Li Jingliang, Rocco Martin, and now Robbie Lawler 3 straight after getting knocked out by Santiago Ponzinibbio. But you look at Neil's resume, and he's got wins over Robbie Lawler, Hector Lombard, Johnny Hendricks, Carlos Condit, and has a win over Kelvin Gastelum. Those are the most notable ones on there. And those are some pretty crazy names. You're talking about 2 former champions, 2 perennial contenders, a former interim champion in Carlos Condit, so 3 former champions. But the problem is it feels like Neil always gets those wins when those guys are unquestionably past their prime. Maybe not Kelvin, obviously. He's not in that same category, but definitely with Hector, where he survived a storm, ended up beating him. Carlos Condit, Robbie Lawler, and Johnny Hendricks, all those guys kind of on the way out. He beat Johnny Hendricks when he was going through the whole thing where he couldn't make weight to save his life. So it's unfortunate for a guy in Neil who, they're talking about can be up there with the most welterweight wins of all time. Just cracked the top 15. And yeah, he's got some notable losses on there, like losing to RDA, Lorenz Larkin, Ponzinibbio, like I mentioned, Damian Maia. But these are, first of all, those are all excellent fighters. And second of all, it doesn't, he just never quite lines up that big time win with that win meaning the most. It also wasn't the most thrilling fight in the world for sure. I mean, he was taking, he was on top of Robbie, was controlling most of it. But in fairness, he was dominating on the feet too. Whenever the fight was on top, it's not like Robbie was able to pull the trigger on the shotgun, and we saw that same ruthless Robbie Lawler that we've come to know and love, and we haven't for a while now. And so that's kind of where I got to take the exit off of giving all the credit to Neil and all that type of stuff, because we do got to talk about where Robbie Lawler stands right now. And I would venture to say Robbie Lawler is one of my favorite fighters of all time. As I said, I thought at one point was the most entertaining fighter of all time. Even if that crown's been taken now, but this is 4 straight losses for him now. It's 5 out of 6 losses over his career. I will put the asterisk on it. Yeah, the Ben Askren loss is completely fugazi. Maybe he would have gone to wreck shop on Ben, but maybe he wouldn't have. Like, don't forget in that fight that he dumped Ben Askren right on his big curly head, and Ben was able to weather the storm. And even if he didn't win that fight in the eyes of a lot of fans, he did get his hand raised, which is because he had Robbie in some kind of control. And that's another, that's definitely another theme you can look at some of these losses where losing to guys like Neil and losing to Colby and losing to Ben. They're not playing the game with Robbie Lawler. They're not playing the game where Rory is and Johnny Hendricks and Matt Brown and Jake. They're not playing that game with him. But also those pockets where he used to be so great. You think back to the Carlos Condit fight where he won that fight in a lot of 30-second bursts. Close fight too. I mean, it's a lot of people thought that Carlos Condit should have gotten the nod in that fight. I thought that Robbie, should have gotten the nod, but I fully will admit that I was a Robbie Lawler homer at the time and still am. But Robbie won that fight on just these incredible bursts where, like, you could just tell he was biding his time, and he could just boom hit the trigger and just go and unload hell on you for 30 to 45 seconds, maybe a final minute of a round to steal it. So that's definitely an element that's missing. He had certain pockets against Neil, not much, but even the ones where he was standing in front of him, Neil had the reach, Neil had that sick jab, and Robbie wasn't really willing to go through the wood chipper to unleash hell on him. He's kind of been through everything, and you wonder just if all those wars and the vicious knockouts and all that type of stuff just wears on you. You're just not willing to take the risk at 38 that you are at 30 or at 32. It's just doesn't seem like the same type of guy. And that was very noticeable. This was very noticeable in his last fight against Colby. The 2 losses before that, if people want to go back to the Tyron Woodley loss, and I saw that a lot of that today, and I don't know if it's just getting knocked out by Tyron Woodley, you don't recover from that. Yeah, it was a vicious bomb, and it was probably the highlight of Tyron Woodley's career for sure. But I don't know if it necessarily goes to that. I think it's been a couple of bad style matchups for him. He's had some injuries. You think of the Rafael dos Anjos fight. He fought that fight on a torn ACL, and I didn't think that I didn't think he got dominated in that fight. I thought that he did actually a pretty damn good job for a guy fighting on one leg, basically doing rope or cage dope up against on Rafael dos Anjos. We mentioned the Ben Askren fight. Unfortunate what happened to him with the referee, but with how the rest of Ben's UFC career to be the only guy that lost to him in the UFC, that's not a great thing that you want on your resume. The Colby fight, though, was definitely the turner. Like, that was the one where you're like, I don't know if this guy's got the same gears that he can get to anymore, because it wasn't just that Colby like controlled him for that fight. Like, he let Colby outstrike him, and he looked like a guy that never wanted to pull the trigger because he didn't want to be the guy that got finished by Colby Covington. I just never remember in his career anybody making him look that bad. And this fight with Neil, it's not like he got embarrassed by Neil Magny, but he was never in the fight. You just never saw, the vintage Robbie Lawler who could go tear Neil's head off. And even in those small pockets where he might have had that place to go, it just wasn't there for him. So I don't know. I don't know where his career goes from here. He's going to be he's nearly touching 40 years old. He doesn't feel close anywhere near to a contender. Is this something where maybe it's best served if Robbie goes to Bellator, or maybe Robbie goes to another promotion where he could fight somebody that stylistically will give him some more entertaining fights. Maybe he'll be a little bit more revitalized. They could use his name. Obviously, there's value in his name. I think that if you saw this week, I mean, he was getting promoted by the UFC's social media more than anybody. Not even close. I mean, they played that damn Robbie Lawler, "I'll take his soul" clip about Conor McGregor. They played that a gazillion times on Twitter this week. And by the way, he doesn't look like that guy right now. Like he doesn't seem like the guy who's going to go take anybody's soul. So that was the big whimper out of last night. There were some great performances though. I don't want this all to just be, hey, the last two events sucked, because first of all, Ricardo Lamas, Alexa Grasso, great performance by her against Ji Yeon Kim. Great performance by her. Ricardo Lamas, he may retire. That was something that he was pondering after the fight. And if that's the case, that's another guy who's had a hell of a career, been a former title contender, and probably a guy who's always just been up there as among the tops in the UFC. But he is 38 years old. Has had some good wins, has had some tough losses. Like it's been one of those things. I was at his. I had Ricardo in studio once, way on back. And I think it was for the Jose Aldo fight when he was doing promos for that. And I actually ended up going to that fight in New Jersey. We were there for the Super Bowl, and Ricardo's trained down here. He trains at MMA Masters, which we've been mentioning a lot lately. I talked about this last week in our interview with Danny Chavez. They feel like the gym down here that has something really special brewing. I just feel like you think about the weeks that they've had between Miguel Baeza. They've owned the quarantine, I'll tell you that much. Miguel Baeza winning, Danny Chavez winning, Ricardo Lamas winning, Colby Covington's coming up against Tyron Woodley. I think a lot of people would favor Colby to win that fight. They've been on a hell of a run, MMA Masters. They really, really have, as far as like what the top South Florida gym is. And I think they got that underdog mentality because, with ATT, look, they still got a lot of killers. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to disrespect the powerhouse that is ATT, or even Hard Knocks 365, which has a bunch of great fighters, even if, Kamaru is ventured onto other places. They just had a really good run in MMA Masters. You got to give them props. They got some great fighters down there. And it's great to see. So if that is the end for Ricardo Lamas, fun career, man. And I'll remember that Jose Aldo fight. He was putting it on him at the end of that fight too. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here for sure. Him versus Max Holloway, fun fight as well. He's fought the who's who. It's been a really, really good career for him. Speaking of Miami, Alex Caceres, he got a win over Austin Springer. He choked him out, rear naked choke. Bruce Leroy doesn't have the fro anymore. He got rid of the hair. I was shook. I didn't see that in any training videos or pre-fight coverage. He just walked out there, no hair. I was like, whoa. He's walking to the ring. He's doing this hilarious dance on the way to, like, I don't know what the hell. What was it? Was it like ragtime that he was doing? It was like something straight out of Boardwalk Empire. And he made easy work out of Austin Springer. Like, he leaped right into that rear naked choke. Made easy work of a guy who didn't look fantastic, took the fight on short notice, missed weight. But still, 3 straight for Alex Caceres. Bruce Leroy is on the right track for sure. And that's a fun division that he's in at featherweight. So, this is a couple of guys. He's being able to take on a young guy, Chase Hooper, a guy taking on his UFC debut. So hopefully, maybe for his next fight, take on somebody for one that he can plan for a little bit more. And for two, is is one that's going to maybe get him back into contention and get him back into people thinking about him, because he's another one like a lot like Neil Magny, where he's been around the game for a while, but you need those prime wins to get yourself into contendership. So shout out to Miami's own Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres, one of the OGs from the backyard, and got himself a win. And then the other one I want to make a note of is Sean Brady. Looked really good against Christian Aguilera, and Sean's one of those guys where I'm trying to remember this is probably 3 years back now. I'm going to bring it up. It was at Shogun Fights. It was against Colton Smith, the UFC vet. He's been, he's 13-0 now, but I was at that fight at the Hard Rock, and he's been great. I mean, he's now 3-0 in the UFC. He gets his first finish against Christian Aguilera. Looked absolutely fantastic. Vicious guillotine, just put Christian Aguilera to sleep. Didn't even tap him out. Paul Felder was raving about him. They're training partners in Philly. But Sean's a talented fighter, and when he fought down here in Miami, brought a big time crowd to come support him, which is very impressive to get that kind of a caravan down here to South Florida to come support you. But he had a great performance as well. So